Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to TravMedia's first ever webinar. Great to have you with us. I'm Henry Hemming, Managing Director of TravMedia. So we hold this online conference at an extraordinary time for us all as citizens and, of course, as people whose lives are inextricably bound to the travel industry. Before we get started, I think TravMedia would just like to send fondest good wishes to everyone in our audience today and in our wider community. Almost everyone has some personal connection with this epidemic, the world war of our lives, as I've heard it described. From those of you who are living in lockdown alone, through to those of you who have had loved ones that have become ill or indeed passed away, our sincerest good wishes are with you all. So today's event is the first webinar we plan to run under the TravMedia Meets banner, and today's topic is coronavirus, as you'd expect, and its impact on our sector. We're looking at how the media is reporting during the epidemic, how travel pages have changed, the kind of stories and angles that they're looking for, and how you PR professionals can help. We're also very delighted to welcome a preeminent panel also of PR bosses to discuss how the epidemic has shaken up things from their perspective and how their businesses are running and how they see long-term shift back to normal. So our panel today is Lisa Minot, travel editor of The Sun, Isabel Choat, online travel editor at The Guardian, Jennifer Morris, news editor of TTG, Claire Griffin, managing director of MMGY Grifco PR, Rachel O'Connor, founding director and CEO of Siren Comms, and Paul Charles, founder and CEO of the PC Agency. We were turning to the audience, we were delighted to have well over 200 registrations for today's event, and we're up past 160 people as I speak. Our audience comprises PRs from across the travel sector and a number of freelance journalists from TravMedia's community. We also have a fair sprinkling of other stakeholders in the industry. I'd like to start by encouraging our audience right now to start posting questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. I know you've all become Zoom experts in recent weeks, so if you just look bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A button. Please feel free even now to post questions. Zoom will tell us your name, and the chances are we'll know the company you work for, but if you could just at the end of your questions put the company you work for as well, that will help. We are on social today. We are promoting a hashtag of TravMedia Meets, and TravMedia's social handles are at TravMedia_UK. Quick word on TravMedia Meets. It's breaking down into 3 channels. We've got these news webinars that we will hold regularly, but we want to change the focus of each one so that we explore the news agenda from different angles. We are also launching online professional development sessions for our PR community, and we're going to launch a program of social get-togethers under the TravMedia MediaPlace banner. We're looking for sponsors for those. Money will go to charity, and we're going to invite our audience of journalists and PRs to talk about where they'd rather be, because we have to have a bit of fun and a bit of levity in this really tough time for us all being in quarantine. So we're going to give you, the journalists, the chance to talk about the greatest destinations you've visited on press trips, or we'll give you PRs the chance to talk about some of your clients and why you love hosting, press facilities to your clients, kind of cruise lines, hotels, worldwide destinations. So we'll be in touch with you about that. Just finally, we're open to suggestions for speakers at the webinars. If you'd like to get involved in any of those 3 channels, the social, the professional development session, and these news webinars, just let the team know. Also put your spokespeople forward. And we will get started. I'll introduce our panelists one by one, and they're going to give us a little overview of things from their perspective. And again, for a little bit of light relief, I've also asked panelists what their coping mechanisms have been during this quarantining. And so we're going to find out a little bit about what they've been up to. So first up, The Sun's travel editor needs very little introduction, but it is Lisa Minot. Lisa's been travel editor of The Sun for 21 years, the longest standing travel editor on what used to be called Fleet Street. She's a regular contributor also to TV and radio. She's traveled to every corner of the globe, but actually she's never happier than when relaxing in her caravan in the south of France. I asked her how she's coped with the lockdown, and in her typically forthright and gung-ho way, she says, the best I can come up with is I'm proud of myself for not having killed the husband and kids, and the fact that I've waited every day until 6 p.m. before opening a bottle of wine. Well, Lisa, we're all with you there. We're all with you there. Lovely to have you here today. Would you tell our audience about things from your perspective?
Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you're all keeping really well. It is, as you can imagine, quite challenging at the moment. We have seen advertising in the paper drop off quite considerably for travel, and that has actually meant that, insanely, we have more travel pages rather than less at the moment. This weekend we had 5 pages Saturday and 5 pages Sunday, and that is a challenge because although I now do have a sort of a small, modest freelance travel budget, I am having to try to sort of generate a lot of that copy myself. I am aware of the fact that when we've had PRs send our journalists out on press trips before the crisis, they're probably really not that keen on me running that kind of copy right now. So I'm trying to keep all of that in reserve and waiting for the day when we can actually sort of start traveling again. And we're using a combination of freelance journalists and then also our own staff to fill the travel pages with what we hope is sort of inspirational, bucket list, advisory and retrospective type copy. We're trying to say to people, you know, there's on the front of every paper is front of every travel section, there's something that says, look, you know, we know you can't travel now, we know we're in lockdown, but here's how you can plan, here's how you can dream for the time when we can actually start traveling again. We have had some quite good feedback, actually. We did a piece this weekend, which was dream duo destinations. So, you know, once we're out of lockdown, the idea being, you know, make the most of your holiday by taking it a twin centre trip. And I had a feedback from one of the PRs this week that said that the company that he had put forward details for had over a dozen booking inquiries this weekend. Half to that piece had got in the paper, which was really cheery for me. I know it's only a dozen, but a dozen booking inquiries when nobody can travel, I didn't think was bad at all. So we're doing a bit of that. We've come up with some new columns because what we're really struggling with is holiday news. There just isn't any. Nobody's writing, nobody's giving us any holiday news. So to soak up the space in the paper, we've been coming up with some new column ideas. So we've got a Wish You Were Here column where we're encouraging some readers to send in pictures of where they wish they were at the moment. We have a Sofa Escapes column, which is a sort of virtual travel to a particular destination via books, TV, cookery, whatever. There's a format for that. And actually this week, I'm actually asking PRs if they can to help me with a new column that I want to put out. This is going to be just a single column on a tabloid newspaper, so it's not going to be big, but just called Take 3. So it'll be Take 3 infinity pools, Take 3 shepherd's huts, Take 3 hotels with great views, whatever you want it to be, and then split into budget, bargain and blowout categories. And I'm happy to accept ideas for that from anybody. We have asked some journalists if they would help me out by providing copy from their own holidays. I've had a massive response. I was really surprised at how much of a response I had. So I've got a lot of copy that's come in from some journalists that I'll be needing fact boxes for, because obviously these were all taken as, you know, holidays by the individuals themselves. So I might also be getting in contact with a fair few of you over the next few weeks just to try to get some fact box information to go with what effectively are just, for me, free articles. And really that's about it. Hope I haven't talked for too long.
Terrific, Lisa, thanks for that. I'm sure the freelancers who heard the word budget will have been very, very happy with that. So turning to Isabel Choat, the Guardian's online travel editor. Isabel, great to have you with us. Isabel's been with the Guardian's travel desk for 17 years, last 9 editing the travel website. During that time, the Guardian's travel section has evolved to reflect the way the Guardian's readers travel. They were the first to introduce Twitter trips, amongst the first to launch locals guides, and more recently they've focused almost exclusively on flight-free travel. I think that's except for when, you know, flights are directly linked to the, you know, the viability of the local community. Isabel was already attempting to go flight free this year, and she's fairly confident of possibly achieving it. In between work and homeschooling, she says, I'm doing exactly what you'd expect a Guardian journalist to do. I'm taking up whittling. And she has managed to whittle a bird, but apparently her children think it looks more like a mouse. So well done. We look forward to your Mount Rushmore, Isabel. Over to you on your thoughts, please.
Hello, thank you, and hi everybody. Hope you're keeping well. Wow, yeah, so weird time. So basically, everything's been turned upside down. It's a really, of all the sort of challenges we've had, this is by far the most surreal for all of us, and it feels sort of existential, trying to run a travel section when no one in the world can travel. But it has been it has been really a really interesting challenge. So I think the hardest bit was the first couple of weeks when we were scrambling to keep up with the pace of change, when the news was different every hour. And, you know, first of all, there were country restrictions, and then there were UK restrictions, and then, you know, we could still go out into the countryside, but then places like National Trust properties started closing down, and slowly the world started to close, and we were sort of rushing to keep up with that, and that was probably the most challenging period, those initial couple of weeks. Now we're actually in full lockdown and we know where we stand. It's been a little bit more settled, and we, like every other section, are focusing on we're doing a lot of virtual travel, all the film and book and podcast lists you could you would imagine. We're also introducing a few new regular columns, like a postcard from the future, where a writer talks about the place they're most looking forward to going back to. We're doing quite a lot of on the sort of consumer side, so consumer issues. We set up a reader Q&A, and we've got about nearly 1,000 questions, most of which revolve around the issue, of course, of refunds. So we've been doing a lot on that, and that's been getting a huge response, and is obviously an ongoing issue for readers. Apart from that, what we're doing is we're not doing any kind of what you'd call normal travel, standard travel, but we are running sort of more classic travel journalism. So pieces that we think are simply great reads. They might be slightly more obscure. For example, we've got something coming up on a guy who was inspired by the shipping forecast. We've had a piece this week on the world's most remote B&B in Papua New Guinea. So these are the sorts of features that we wouldn't normally run, but are now we're now publishing because we think they're just sort of great sort of deep dives into a destination, but not necessarily a call to travel. We're not telling people they should be going to Papua New Guinea tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, I guess the three main threads are virtual tourism, kind of pure good meteor reads, and the sort of consumer issues. Those are the three main strands. The travel section's been the dedicated travel section, print travel section's been dropped. Or suspended rather, and now we've got 4 pages in the main paper on Saturdays, with about roughly 6 stories, and obviously we're still publishing online every day. So I think that's about it.
And are the consumer issues taking up a lot of kind of online pages at the moment?
Not a lot, because we don't have the resources, and I mean that's almost a full-time job in itself, is keeping up with. It's just been me trying to answer questions, and I'm not a consumer rights expert, and I just, you know, there's a limit to the number of questions I can answer. But I mean, a lot of the questions are basically the same question. I mean, this is basically the same theme, which is, why can't I get a refund? I mean, that is proving to be a, you know, it's the sort of the main source of frustrations for readers. And I've tried to be balanced in answering those questions and pointing out the huge challenges that the industry faces as well, and this whole idea of postponing and not cancelling. But I mean, you know, from a consumer point of view, there are people out there who just need that money now, and yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and actually it's incredibly complicated as well. If you look at people who haven't necessarily booked a package but have just booked individual elements of their holiday, it gets quite complicated. But yeah, I wouldn't say that's been a huge part of what we've done, but when we're doing a weekly Q&A. When we do it, it gets a lot of traffic.
Thank you very much, Isabel. That B&B in Papua New Guinea sounds very good right now. Turning now to the issue of kind of tour operators and agents keeping their heads above water, and the issue of cancellations and discussions about voucher schemes instead of refunds, we're going to turn to Jennifer Morris, news editor of TTG. Jennifer joined TTG some time ago. She's been a news editor for 3 years. She also does some travel writing in the paper's feature section and TTG Luxury. She's helped steer TTG to Independent Publishing Company of the Year at the PPA Awards, and they won the inaugural Trade Paper of the Year at the TravMedia Awards just after IMM. Jennifer is proud to hail from Rutland, England's smallest county, on which she has written many times, and she edits TTG from there with a rather beautiful back garden behind her, in a house full of relatives and relatives-in-law. I hope this isn't Meet the Parents times 2. She tells me during lockdown she has dabbled with poetry successfully and with banana bread disastrously. Jennifer, what's the trade perspective on this, and how are you liaising with the PR world at the moment?
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me today. Hope everyone's doing okay. So obviously a very different angle for us being B2B. I think for us the main kind of strategy is to stay as close as we can really to the industry. It's kind of a funny situation where actually, you know, our website traffic's never been busier because there's just travel industry story after travel industry story. That's kind of on the news section, and I think it's already been kind of alluded to. You know, the huge issue at the moment is the refunds debate, which is obviously bleeding into the consumer press as well, and kind of constant updates on that. We've got the kind of perspective obviously of the trade, but even within the trade you've got tour operators as well as travel agents, and then also the sort of the suppliers at the other end, the kind of airlines and hotels who are perhaps not necessarily releasing the money to then go on to the agents and operators, which is causing the issue in terms of cash flow at the moment. So that's a really big issue at the moment, along with other things like furloughing, the fact that a lot of travel agents and tour operators at the moment, you know, need to be at work to be able to service all of these inquiries and requests and changes, but obviously if they're furloughed they can't actually do that. So, you know, we're trying to kind of help communicate those messages to the relevant bodies to try and get a bit of, you know, action and sort of have those issues looked at. In terms of, well, just one other thing to flag is we've also just this week launched something called a travel agent tracker, which we're going to be releasing weekly. So obviously it's quite in its infancy at the moment, but we are trying to survey kind of hundreds of our readers each week to get a bit of a feel for how many bookings they've been taking and things like that. And I think the headline figure from our latest one was that a third of travel agents had actually made a booking last week, which might sound, you know, not much of an amount, but actually, you know, it's maybe a positive sign that bookings are being taken, especially for next year. In terms of TTG, we've, as I said, our website's actually really busy, but we aren't publishing our magazine at the moment. Fully intend to restart that as soon as we can, and we are still producing a digital edition, just to try and keep that continuity up really. And we're trying to include, you know, unique things in the magazine. We always do anyway, but even more just make sure there's a real reason to kind of go and click onto that digital edition. But a lot of our time actually in the last couple of weeks has been taken up with some new initiatives that we've launched, as I said, to just try and stay as close as we can to the industry and be as helpful as possible. So we've actually launched an entire hub on our website called the Coronavirus Business Support Service. And that has, along with kind of the normal news that would go on our website that's placed into that section, also kind of just helpful content. So that can be everything from, you know, lawyers giving their tips to kind of hotels offering, podcast advice and things. So we are definitely open to suggestions for that kind of content as well. We've also been doing panel discussions. We've got something called Business Support Live, which we're doing on Fridays. So if PRs have any kind of suggestions for high profile people who might like to take part in some of those, that's really welcome as well. And our Facebook Lives have been doing really well, actually. We've started having a couple, slightly more of a commercial thing, but we had one with Tourism Australia this week, which actually had thousands and thousands of views and probably more engagement than we had seen previously for similar things. Because I think that, the trade is available to perhaps to be kind of engaging and taking part with a few more of these things. And one slightly kind of nicer thing is we also, we started using a hashtag called One Travel Industry, which we've been trying to push out as much as we can on Twitter. And we've actually kind of expanded that to work alongside other travel trade media as well. This kind of idea of hashtag One Travel Trade Media as well. And it's been quite nice to kind of see competing titles traditionally kind of get involved with trying to promote positive messages and good stories of kind of support and helping one another. So in terms of how we are kind of engaging with PRs at the moment, we're not similar to the other guys. We're not running destination features, but we still are running loads of features in our magazine and online with kind of support and advice and help. And they can be quite sort of specific. I think we had one recently about tour guides who were, a tour operator who was fundraising for tour guides in Nepal because they knew how close kind of a lot of agents and consumers are, feel towards those people. So, definitely open to any kind of suggestions for that kind of content. Again, opinion pieces, we're always looking for strong opinion pieces to run on the website or in the magazine. Positive news stories that we can run alongside this hashtag One Travel Industry, hashtag, well-being, all kinds of things really, sort of from the kind of hard news side all the way through to perhaps more kind of long read features pieces. So definitely still want to be engaging. It's just a case like everybody else that I think in terms of destination features, that will come a bit later down the line. But we will want to be getting ahead of that and obviously working in advance of when people are actually traveling again. So yeah, I think that's about it from me.
Perfect, Jennifer. And I can already see we've got one or two questions that will be relevant to you later. So thank you very much indeed. We've just passed 200 participants today. We're at 202, which is fantastic. So I'm now going to turn to our PR agency bosses, and I'd like to welcome, first of all, Claire Griffin. Claire is Managing Director of MMGY Grifco PR, Executive Director of MMGY of Fear PR, and Partner at MMGY Global. She's worked in PR for almost 30 years, setting up Grifco in 2002 and Afear in 2011, and they merged with MMGY, one of the world's leading integrated travel marketing companies, in 2018. Her teams specialize in luxury travel PR. She's launched many of the world's most famous hotels and made many unknown hotels known and renowned. She's dealt with many travel crises. She has 85 clients worldwide and still works with her very first luxury client, ITC, after all these years. Together with her, she's at home, she's taught her sons how to iron shirts, set the washing machine, make meals, and they all go off jogging together as a family. So she's found a way to cope with this crisis. Very good to have you here, Claire. Could you give us the PR perspective on this crisis and how you're dealing with it and ways forward?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much indeed for the introduction and for inviting me today. I think there's never been a time where we should all speak together and be following the hashtag all in this together. We really do need to sort of share ideas and support each other through these times. And I think to all those PRs watching today, it is a really worrying time about so many different things. And I think it actually is helped by talking and answering questions. So the platform is so important and one I really wanted to get involved in today. And for me, I can remember when this all happened. It was March, and I can remember the conversations with clients, particularly in Asia, worrying. Things were getting precarious. Things were starting to change. And I started to think this is a bit different to any of the other crises I've dealt with in my 30 years in this industry. And I have a very collegiate way of thinking. I'm a real team player, and I started talking to my team about it, from junior members of staff to senior members of staff, just talking openly about the fact that this is going to be a difficult time. We are going to have to look at this differently. This was before furloughs were introduced. This was before anybody really, I think, realized the lockdown would even happen. And we talked openly as a team about how we could best get through this. As a team, maybe we would have to start working on reduced hours. Maybe we need to help clients work, you know, we might have to work with some clients that are in special needs and really need our support, but we might have to look at taking reductions. They needed a voice. And then Friday the 13th, I think things started to get a little bit more worrying, and clients started to discuss with us, and I'm sure this happened to all the other people who were on this call, you know, we don't think we can look at doing this anymore. We're going to have to press the pause button. And I don't know, I wrote a piece about the question of pausing your PR company and reducing the work. There's a massive difference. And one of the things I would say has been a real advantage to just talk to your clients about the benefits of having a voice. You need to be heard at this time. You can't just stop the communication, and you can't just pause a team. I think being honest with clients and saying to them, that's great that you want to come back and stop and pause our work for 3 months. Of course, we'd love to say we can do that, but have you thought about the fact that by doing that, we might not be here in 3 months? Yeah. And actually, I think that PRs are often the first people to want to please their clients and want to do the right thing and see them through. And I think the difference between this crisis and another crisis is that when we were dealing with the tsunamis or the avalanches or the ash cloud or 9/11, it's a specific client problem in one place. And clients are used to PRs being able to say, yes, we can support you through that. And of course, we can work through that with you and take a reduction on our monies, etc. But when it happens across the world and everybody asks for the same thing at the same time, no business can stand through that. So I think it's having very honest conversations. One of the things I learned was to talk very openly to all our clients around the world about how they actually have to support each other through this time, and we have to look at reduction of workloads, not pause. And I think that's a really important take home that I hope will guide some people who have their own PR agencies into the importance of that. And actually for your own survival, that conversation is key. I think there are lots of positives. There are people saying, you know, this is not forever. You have to remember that it's getting through these short-term months. If we can get through this, through the months of May, June, July, we will be doing very, very well indeed. And you need to remember that it's getting through the hard short term. I think Isabel made reference to the fact that, you know, those first 2 weeks were sheer pandemonium. You know, everybody learning something new every day. There has been a plateau. We're actually getting used to the fact that we're living with the coronavirus. We're now getting to the point where clients are going through a very different psychological frame of mind, and we have to convince them that, you know, things will pick up again, and actually don't press pause. Reduce if you have to, but things are, you know, your hotel will survive this. It just needs to close for a few months. And actually hand-holding clients through panic is a really key thing. Actually, they can't see the wood for the trees, and actually having a third party to give them a vision is really important. And one of the things that the teams at Grifco are doing are working on plans for the future. And when I say it's having short-term plans, and even if a hotel or resort or destination is going to be closed for longer than they think, they still need a plan. They still need to know what they're going to do. If you're never going to open this year as a resort, what's your voice? You still need to say something. You can't just close down. So we've been doing lots of plans with clients, lots of very, very frank and honest conversations that we've never really had with clients before about working to support each other. And I think that it's a time that just travel brands, my main thing would say is that to have that voice is imperative. If you're not heard, then we have to convince people they need to be heard. They need to be communicating with the press. And the British press are one of the most respected press around the world. They are read all over the world, and they need to have stories. And the fact that Lisa doesn't have those news stories at the moment, she should have, and people still have got opinions and news, and they just need to encourage their clients to try and share that information with them, that we can duly share it with the press. I hope that gives us some positivity to the fact that we are all in this together. We're all having a difficult time, but you have to keep the wheels turning. We have to not just throw it all in and give up, but you have to have a mentally strong attitude to drive forward and continue. And a lot of people working from home and a lot of PRs just have to try and find that strength to keep that positivity going at a time when they might not be feeling particularly positive. It's really important.
Thank you so much, Claire. I think there was a plethora of interesting insights, and I think very helpful to the people representing the smaller travel PR companies in our audience and the independents. It's don't stop, at worst reduce, but you need PRs with you at this time, and you need them to be on message and ready to grow again as you grow again. Thank you so much. And let's turn to a recognized crisis expert. Mr. Paul Charles needs very little introduction, but with Paul, I'm going to introduce him back to front. So I'm going to say he's currently learning how to make bread. He's managing to read more than one book a week, and he's attempting 20,000 steps a day. Attempting, he's told me. There's a key word there. So Paul became a BBC News presenter, rose to become communications director to Sir Richard Branson at Virgin Atlantic, worked as head of comms at Eurostar, now runs the PC Agency, a global travel PR company based in the United Kingdom. The agency has secured the most influential in travel PR for 4 years running in PR Week, and Paul himself has been in the PR Week Power Book every year since it started in 2007, which is an amazing achievement. So Paul, building on those thoughts of Claire, what are your thoughts at this time, and how are you responding to this crisis?
Thank you, Henry. That's a very kind introduction. Great to see so many people on the Zoom call. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. I'm going to start with perhaps the more negative and then go on to where I see the positives. And as Claire said, there are many positives to look out for, but we've got to get through the next few months. It's actually only around 25 days since the lockdown started in the UK, yet it feels like a lifetime, doesn't it? When was the last time you went for a meal outside? When was the last time that you went to the cinema? It does feel almost like another era. And it's ironic, I think, that the very sector that we all take part in and promote has in fact been brought to its knees because of people traveling around and spreading the virus globally. Obviously, most affected are luxury hotels, the cruise lines, the restaurants, who've had to shut, at least temporarily. The airlines, of course, who are now just generally flying cargo around, PPE equipment, repatriating. They've taken on a new lease of life that way, but of course they're not flying passengers around. Airports are barely operating, or at least closing terminals. Extraordinary to see Heathrow merging terminals and closing terminals. Tourism boards, I think, are in slightly better shape. They're focusing on renewal campaigns and post-coronavirus. How do they reset? And I'll come on to that. And the crisis area, as you say, Henry, we're very busy in that area. It's keeping my fantastic team very busy as well. And I'm pleased to say a lot of people are asking for crisis work. I, however, don't subscribe to the strong bounce back view in July. I'm afraid we're in this for the long haul. I remember SARS back in 2002 and 2003. This coronavirus is 10 times deadlier than SARS, and it's going to have obviously a much worse impact. Until a vaccine is mass produced, and it's not going to be until next year, then I think many travel groups won't want to travel. They're not going to take the risk of traveling beyond their borders in case they get stuck. So the 60+ baby boomers, for example, who've driven most of the substantial growth in travel over the last 10 years, they're not going to risk catching COVID-19 by booking at the moment and traveling somewhere where the borders are closed and they're not sure when they're going to reopen. I think the multi-generational groups who've driven luxury villas, who've driven lodges, hotel growth, they won't be traveling outside the UK until there's a confirmed cure. And to give you a sense of the scale, we're looking at, according to some figures from World Travel and Tourism Council, 75 million jobs at risk globally. 10 million in Europe, 1 million in the UK. This is how big it is. There is no way this industry is bouncing back in any way in June or July. It's going to take much longer. So it's not going to be business as usual. There won't be a normality until later next year, I think, at the earliest, for so many reasons. So that's my negative side. That's where obviously we're going to have to get through the next few months through a combination of government schemes, furloughs, bailouts to airlines, hotels grabbing what grants they can, tourism boards resetting, etc. But there are some positives, obviously. I think domestic tourism is going to be much stronger in the UK once the lockdown starts to fizzle out over the next 3 months or so. People will want to get around the UK at least if they can't leave our shores. I think over-tourism in just a space of 10 weeks has been replaced by under-tourism. That's a good thing. And so I think tourism boards now are asking themselves, when they do reopen their borders, what are they reopening them for? What sort of visitors are they going to get? Do they want high quality tourists and fewer of them? Or do they want the mass market and potentially risk going back to over-tourism? But I don't think that's going to happen. So what tourism boards do is going to be critical to how we all move around. I think airlines, it's a good thing in a way. They're going to have the opportunity to retire all their old gas-guzzling planes. They're going to become more fuel efficient overnight, not by choice, but because they're forced to. And I think hotels actually are going to be the worst off because there are going to be fewer openings over the longer term, simply because the money won't be there for owners to open the number of hotels that they want to, especially in 2022 and 2023. Ones that are further off are going to take a lot longer to come back. So I think overall it's a chance for the sector to reset, for not just us as PR agencies to reset and who we're focusing on, but also for the industry itself to say, how do we become more responsible? And I think travellers themselves will be more responsible in where they go and how they travel. So just a few thoughts there, and obviously happy to come back on other more detailed stuff later.
Terrific, Paul. I think we'll have a ton of questions on that. That was an amazing insight. Thank you so much. And finally, to wrap up our panel before we move to questions, I know we've got lots of questions already for our panelists. We've got Rachel O'Connor, who I've known many years. She started off at Travel News or ABC. Does anyone remember Travel News? Worked in travel PR with Marketeers, TPS, Visit Florida. I remember visiting you there. McCluskey. Diverted to Hill & Knowlton for 8 years working on consumer brands, then set up a youth marketing agency for WPP before creating her own agency, Siren Communications, in 2002, which has gone on to become one of the leading travel industry PR companies. Rachel built this award-winning business with a client mix across travel, tourism, but also food, drink, B2B, B2C. Recently, she has taken up a profession of hairdressing. She does buzz cuts for her teenage boys and proper scissors for hubby. Personally, I'd be quite worried by the phrase scissors for hubby, but anyway, I won't go there. She's a terrific team leader and keeps team morale up by currently doing Zoom calls in fancy dress outfits, such as she's appeared as a horse, though not as a potato. So that's very, very good to hear. Rachel, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are at this time.
I mean, thanks, Henry, for that long introduction, but shows how old I am, really. And thank you for inviting us. A great amount, I guess, of what we're experiencing has already been communicated by the eminent panel members. So I won't sort of waste valuable time when people can Q&A us. I think, you know, our journey through this last 3-4 weeks has probably been one of the most intense. As Claire said, this isn't a crisis like any other any of us has seen before. And I also am afraid I agree with Paul in that I think the bounce back will be long and slow and probably much later than we think it will. So within that, you know, what is our role mostly for our clients? We work across, as you said, B2C as well as B2B. And in a way, our client list was a little bit like an early warning system. So we have business travel clients who were immediately impacted, and the pace of that industry, which I always think is a barometer for the general economy, was something like I've never seen before. And really our main approach was to support and do whatever our clients needed in that first sort of, I guess it was 2 to 4 days over that horrific weekend. And it's almost apocalyptic, and I hate to say it, but actually it was, in terms of the change that everybody was experiencing. And therefore the objectivity which Claire mentioned of providing, being an out-of-house extension of a team can be useful in terms of taking work away, but also providing objectivity, sometimes actually just counselling your clients and being another pair of shoulders and head to talk things out. I believe from feedback that's where an awful lot of the value has been perceived by our clients, as well, obviously, as maintaining a voice, as was so eloquently put earlier. So I think our phased approach, we're all in these different phases. The first phase was survive and do whatever the hell was needed to support our clients, because we are interdependent. We're all interdependent in this sector and this and actually on this panel. And therefore the health of our clients and the sustainability of our clients' business models was what we were all focused on, because that obviously impacts us. So we sort of got through the first 3-4 days and then began to think, okay, so clearly things are changing like we've never seen before. What is our role? How can we maintain value and continue to support the businesses and the industry and the sector? So a lot of the team reached out to media, and that is ongoing, to maintain an understanding and insight so that we could feed that back to our clients and then provide what was needed in a hopefully copy ready, efficient way to support our media and influencer partners. And then the other key piece that we have been clearly supporting on, my livelihood is very bound up in my business, and we need to protect the jobs and the people that are working with me and for me. And again, exactly as Claire has said, I've enjoyed and I'm incredibly lucky to have a team that is really engaged, very responsible, but with whom I have a very open relationship. And so that sort of authentic communication, which I think is what we should all be doing, including for our brands and our clients. Open and honest and human is what will get us through this. And the beauty of our relationship is that our industry is that relationships sit at the heart of everything that we do, and therefore fostering, investing in those relationships and maintaining them, having a chat, continuing that outreach is really, really important. And that, I believe, is what will get us through. I think we already are in a bumpy period. Some of our clients have paused, some sadly, have sort of paused for now, and that has an impact on us commercially. And we have to act to maintain what we can. So there's a realism attached to this, not glossy PR fluff. And many of us are no longer in that industry anyway. We have to be open and honest and authentic, and we have to provide value and realistic advice, and we have to continue to support each other across the industry as we navigate through. Positives, collaboration, so reaching out to other agency heads and different disciplines to ensure that we can provide what clients need. Content. We have all enjoyed delivering some phenomenal coverage, exposure, online pieces. How can we renose those to maintain the right share of voice, if you like, or the right visibility for our clients? Working with longer lead media and making sure that we've got packages and offers there. And I think listening to the mood of the industry and what's happening online, and not selling in any capacity right now, which is very much reflected in how Isabel and Lisa have been talking, and also Jennifer, making sure that we provide, if you like, the education and keep the dreams of travel alive and the importance of travel alive. And then using the time that we do have to think and create and prepare and plan. and keep in touch and keep people's spirits up, and find the good news stories. We actually launched a sort of a little piece on through our own social feeds about actually identifying good news, because we felt that that was actually quite important amidst all of the, you know, the really unprecedented and pivot are the words that I sort of seem to be sort of, you know, emblazoned on our forehead at the moment. And I hate both of them, quite honestly, but they are nevertheless, we are in unprecedented times, and trying to find some moments of joy, be that nature, be it friendship, be it a conversation with someone you haven't talked to for a long time, be it looking back over some of the great results that have come from work that you've done together and pushing them forward, I think is really, really key. That's it from me for now.
Hear to all of that, Rachel. We're all with you. So thank you so much for saying that. Let's ask some questions of our panel. I'm going to merge a couple of questions here. One's from a PR, Katrina McGale from SEO Travel. One's from a journalist, Catherine Liston, but they're related. Katrina says, are journalists on our panel interested in data-led stories right now, such as what are people beginning to search for and when? She also says, what are people Instagramming around travel? And Catherine Liston says, Jennifer, you mentioned that travel agents are taking some bookings. What are people booking, where and when? So could our panelists kind of drill down into those two questions, please? Who would like to start?
I don't mind starting. Yes, data-driven stories are useful. We are seeing it online. We're getting a very high take-up in the stories that we're running that are online stories. You know, when can we travel to, or when are we going to be allowed to go back to? They seem to be the stories that are getting the most traction at the moment, the most hits. So that, I think, gives you the idea that obviously there is that, you know, there's that want there to start traveling again as soon as we can. So data-driven stories would be useful. We run a couple this weekend, and I'm happy to do, as I say, I'm short on news, on those little newsy bits that we use to fill around the outside of the big pieces. So it's the kind of thing that I would use, definitely.
Terrific. Jennifer.
Yeah, just to jump in, I think in terms of trends pieces, I think anything around kind of intent and what people are sort of searching online is of interest to our readers, especially for kind of online stories. Might not be used as kind of extensively in the magazine at this point, but I mean, also to flag, you know, a little bit further down the line, when we do start getting back to normal with our, you know, and start printing the magazine again and things like that, we are probably going to need quite a few of these kind of data-led stories to sort of ease our way into that part, that sort of time. So I think, you know, we can definitely have them on file. If you send them through, you know, especially things that might last a little while, we can kind of keep on file, and anything we can get online as a news story, then that's fine. Actually, should we let others answer the same question before going back to the destinations one?
Well, just cover off Catherine Liston's point.
Okay.
Do you know, are people beginning to book 2021, you know, with some assurances around it?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this travel agent tracker that we've recently launched, and I definitely advise people interested to kind of keep checking in. We're going to try and release that, I think, every Tuesday, you know, with fresh information. So that should provide quite a good guide of what's kind of been booked. And the majority were definitely for 2021, but there were a few bookings as well for sort of later in this year, especially around Christmas, some kind of Christmas cruises. Christmas markets, things like that, have sort of had a bit of interest, because I think people see that as, you know, far enough away that they might be within a kind of safe period. And long haul was the sort of dominating sector as well. So there were a lot of bookings, actually, well, a few bookings for the USA. So New York and Las Vegas, Australia came up, the Maldives, Caribbean, Canada, and also Mediterranean cruises. There were a couple of those as well. So bit of a mixture, but yeah, long haul predominantly.
I was going to say, one of our cruise clients, Region 7 Seas, are seeing a lot of bookings for next summer and late 2021. And you might think, why, you know, people can book cruises at the moment, bearing in mind what the cruise industry has gone through, been a bit of a whipping boy over the last few weeks, arguably, for the whole travel industry. And actually, I think the cruise lines could come out of this a lot better than people think, because they're used to putting in place measures to help their guests health-wise on board. And I think if there's one thing that's going to come out of this crisis, it'll be that all of us and everyone that runs a business is going to become a healthcare company as much as a travel PR or as much as a newspaper editor, and we're going to be concerned about the health of our teams and our people that we work with. So cruise lines, as much as anyone else, will put in place a lot of measures which will make the ships actually very safe places to be. They will learn from this, and I know they're already looking at ways to do it. So, and they're used to dealing with viruses on board, albeit on a smaller scale. So I think actually if there's one thing, it'll be that we all think about how our staff get better, how they're protected, how they're well, how they're treated, what are we doing in the office at work when we do get back to the offices, about making sure that people are social distancing. So there's a lot of good things that we're having to think about now that will mean we're going to change the way we do business. And I think cruise lines are a good example of that.
Very good.
I think cruise customers tend to be very loyal as well, don't they, on the whole? So hopefully kind of historic cruisers will continue to cruise. It might just be more of a kind of challenge to target those who were on the verge of booking of their first cruise. And
Isabel, is The Guardian interested in data stories at the moment?
Well, it depends. We get sent data story in normal times. We get sent data stories every single day. We tend not to cover them, but that's usually because they tend to be, either they're sort of slightly daft or not particularly rigorous. So if it was, really solid piece of research that shows something, different, or that we felt was of value and of interest to our readers, potentially yes. I mean, it's just in my experience, usually the sorts of data stories we get are either just kind of your fun throwaway stuff, or just not particularly relevant to our readership. So it really depends on sort of how rigorous the research is.
Understood. So I'm going to ask a question of our... Sorry, carry on.
I'm just going to jump back in there and say...
Please, sir.
Sorry, just jump back in there quickly and say I totally agree with Isabel. Those data stories, they've got to be stories that are actually ones that are believable. What we don't want is the sort of surveys, excuse me if I'm going to just slightly swear here, the sort of the no shit Sherlock surveys that tell you something you already know. That's not what we're looking for. I'm talking about, genuine, where people are looking to book, where they're looking at, traveling to, and the methods, whether they're booking all inclusive or whether they're looking to book more independently. It's that kind of data, that kind of thing that I'm interested in, not, 100% of children like going to swimming pools.
Very good. Very good. A question for our three PR bosses here. From, I think, a smaller PR company, Alex List of Lemongrass. Alex says, if the recovery period is going to take as long as next year, what can PR agencies do for long-term survival, especially when it comes to contract renewals? And maybe Claire, you would start. Oh, Claire, yes.
Long-term survival. I mean, I think, look, we're looking at plans for clients now, where we're actually doing a lot of planning now for 2021, and I'm sure other agencies are too.
Yeah.
Without question, we're being asked for it. We're looking at resorts that are going to be transferring a lot of business into 2021. We're looking at press trips that we've got planned for 2020 that we're moving into 2021 now. So all our planning, even our midterm planning, turning into long-term planning, where we're actually shifting everything across and for equivalent months in 2021 right now. So I think if people haven't started planning for actually integrating their plans for 2020 into 2021, then it's a really good tip to start to do that now, and actually merging 20 into 21 is what we're looking at doing currently.
Okay, that's a very good strategy. And Paul, how do you advise smaller PR companies to be part of their clients' agenda at this moment?
Well, I think a couple of the points that both Rachel and Claire have made specifically are around relationships and also around quality of work that's produced. So fundamentally, it's about making sure that your account teams, or if it's you in a smaller agency, are constantly being visible, talking to your clients and each week, saying what do they need, etc. How can we help? Because every week is different during this crisis at the moment. It's changing so rapidly. And then also, I think the quality of the work. So for example, my team, they're almost busier than they were in the office. There's so much to do, so many calls to do, so many updates they're doing. So they're doing daily and weekly updates for clients, giving them the latest on the coronavirus crisis in the UK from our perspective, picking out the best things that people are doing, the good news stories, the bad news stories, etc. So it's about giving clients something added value, something extra that perhaps they wouldn't be used to or getting from somewhere else. And that makes you as an agency really important to them for their longer term plans. Nobody knows where this is going to go over the next 2 or 3 months. We know we're going to be in lockdown from tomorrow, probably for another 3 to 4 weeks minimum. We know that furloughing is going to probably be extended, maybe to end of June, maybe to July, if we're lucky. And so, I think we're in a position, however big an agency you are, to be able to say, well, we can at least plan long-term plans for next year, but we know as an agency that we can keep together as a team until June or July. And certainly that's my focus at the moment. So I'm making sure the team are looking longer term to how we can protect them and look after them health-wise as well for the longer term.
That's very good. And Rachel?
Sorry. Adding value, maintaining proactivity, and if you can, we talk a lot about partnering with our clients, and therefore with that partnership comes sharing some of the challenges that are keeping us all awake at night. And if you can take, 1 or 2 of those challenges and, do some fresh thinking and apply your objectivity to it and roll it back in, then to the client, that's perceived as helping to move them forward. And planning ahead, really, always planning ahead, and maintaining your contact with the media so that you are able to feed that back in, get the sentiment of your advice right around what the media and influencers need, and where you can take work away on either end, frankly. I think that is going to help support our one industry.
Yeah. Very, very, very good indeed. Okay, I've got a question really from 2 people. Bryony Gammon at Viking and Amy Skelding at Brighter have both asked, are journalists still in the market for virtual tour ideas? And yeah, any thoughts on that?
I can start on that.
Yes.
Yes, in short. I mean, we've ticked off all the sort of obvious pieces in the first few weeks. So we've done all the travel books, travel films, travel podcasts, but there's still an appetite. I mean, there is a huge appetite for any kind of relief from the hard news agenda. I think people are looking for ways to escape, fun ideas. So there is definitely an appetite, but it's a question now of being more creative in what virtual travel means. So, for example, today there's a really nice idea from the Faroe Islands, who have always been good at marketing, very good at marketing, and they have strapped a camera to an actual person who you can direct around the Faroe Islands to sort of show you around the area, which is quite a nice idea. We did a story on that today. I saw another piece today on a virtual holiday to Sweden, to the Arctic, I think. So that's sort of extension of the idea of virtual travel, where you can actually visit a place over a period of days. So I think the key thing now is sort of ingenuity and creativity, and there is definitely an appetite for stories that are a little bit different, slightly, hate this word, but quirky, and just fun. I mean, people are craving slightly, fun, uplifting ideas at the moment, or stories at the moment. So yeah, I would say in short, there is an appetite.
Very good. Any other thoughts on that one?
If I could just add into it, we have got our Safer Escapes column, which we're running every week. I did mention it earlier. And it's basically, you take a destination. It can either be an entire island in the Caribbean or a particular town like Barcelona. And then it's sections. It's read, film, cook, drink, listen, and TV. So basically drawing all of those various different virtual experiences that tourist boards and various different people are offering at the moment, and then drilling it into one particular destination. So always looking for interest on that. And if anyone wants the format, they just need to email me and I can send them through an example. Or they could buy the newspaper. That'd be really good.
Very good.
Actually, sorry, can I just add? Sorry, I should have said with the Guardian's also doing exactly the same idea. We did that. Our first one was on Venice last week. So yeah, same as Lisa, we're doing actual specific destinations, ways of exploring specific destinations as well as looking for kind of one-off stories.
Very good. I've got Christy Lear at Mercury Communications. When would our journalists like to start hearing about 2021 destination recommendations? Do you need something to happen before you're going to be open to those suggestions? A government announcement of some sort.
We've decided not to look ahead at 2021 and sort of going back to normal at all at the moment. So right now we're very much focused on what's happening now, how you can, any means of escape virtually or through just sort of more classic travel journalism. So we're not commissioning for when we come out the other side of this at the moment, and we're not looking ahead to 2021 at the moment. So I think until there's some sign of let up in travel bans and restrictions, lockdown restrictions, we probably won't start looking ahead. At the moment, we're quite a small team, and all our efforts and resources are going into the challenge of producing content every day right now under these very sort of strange circumstances. So no, for now we're not looking that far ahead. And I mean, in terms of when we might, I think it will just be when bans and restrictions start to be lifted.
Very good. Lisa, Lauren Jarvis wants to know if you're open to new journalists pitching for your new Take 3 feature.
No, that was really one for PRs. I'm looking for PRs to send through their own suggestions and their own, photography to go with that. That's the kind of column that we can actually, collate together ourselves.
Understood.
Sorry, freelancers, but no.
No, understood. Paul, this might be for you. Tough one. I don't know if it's entirely fair, but Andy Mossack, my question is on the future of cruising. What do cruise companies need to do to convince future passengers their ships are safe?
Thanks for throwing in a tough one there, Henry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I think it's some of the stuff I was saying earlier, that if cruise companies can prove what they're doing on board, and before you get on board to check temperatures, to check health conditions. I'm a big fan of the introduction, and I think this is going to happen, of a global health passport. And this global health passport will all have, and it will say what we've had, whether we've had coronavirus, whether we've been tested, whether in fact we've got antibodies. And this passport will need to be shown at borders to countries, whether you get on a cruise ship, wherever it might be, before you get on a plane, so that the operator knows exactly what they're dealing with. So an official global health passport may be the answer. There's all sorts of other things. I think cruise operators are going to have to invest in, for example, drinks machines where when you top up your water bottle is not actually touching the water nozzle, because that's how germs are spread. Mm-hmm. So there's going to have to be huge investments by not just cruise lines, but all sorts of operators on those sorts of things. So as I say, I think the cruise industry has a real opportunity to work in a united way to come out of this much more strongly. I really do.
Yeah. This is a question being asked by many journalists on our webinar, so I'm going to mention a few names. Lauren Jarvis, Stuart Forster, Rowena Morella Dorr, of our journalists. what opportunities are there for freelancers out there? It's a tough one, but can anyone throw something, a ray of light here? Who would like to answer that?
I'm not sure whether Isabel wants to go first, but for me, yes, I do have some budget. I literally put out one tweet last week saying I was interested in, stories, pitches from freelancers. I had, to date, I think I've had over 700 replies. And for me at the moment, just working through that has been a challenge. So I would say there's definitely a pause on my side in that I need to just go through what I've got and find the stories that I need. But yes, I mean, that budget will be there, and I think we'll probably have to continue to be there going forward, even once we've come out of lockdown. Practically, I'm not going to be able to get journalists away as quickly as as we're going to need copy for the paper. So please do keep sending them. They're all going into a folder, and when I'm getting a chance, I'm going through them a bit at a time. And I apologise if anyone has already sent something through and I haven't replied. It's not because I'm not interested in the idea, it's just because physically right now I'm trying to get the pages together and haven't had time to go through them all.
Very good.
Isabel? Yes, we are interested, but I guess it's the same. I would say the same. I would say to PRs in that we're looking for sort of upbeat stories. But I think the key is that there's a bit of creativity, perhaps slightly left field stories. You're coming up travel. Well, this whole challenge is an exercise in coming at travel from a completely different angle. So I think the key is to try and, without sounding too cliched, think outside the box, and sort of, as I keep banging on about it, we've ticked off the most obvious responses to people not being able to travel. So now we're looking for just different ideas, but it's definitely worth still pitching. I mean, news stories like the Faroe Islands today, for example, that was written by a freelancer. We've been approaching writers ourselves as well. So yes, in theory we are interested, but like I said, what we're not doing is looking ahead at the moment to when people will be traveling. We're very much still in the lockdown phase. Very good.
Are our panelists okay if we just carry on for about 5-10 more minutes? Is that okay?
Sure.
So I've got a question from Lottie Gross here, and I'm just going to kind of, before asking it, I'll just balance it out with something, just different interpretations of what the future industry will look like. Paul was very, very interesting on this point earlier, I thought. How will the travel industry look? Will people change as human beings in the way they book travel and wish to experience travel? Or will it be a short-term phenomena? And I think our audience would be so interested in your thoughts on this. So I'm going to just quote Tom Jenkins, CEO of Itoa here. So, okay, he's a tour operator head. He's got to speak for tour operator. He says, the natural reaction is to assume the future will be a product of the current situation. It won't. Mass gatherings will return. Theatres, cinemas, football matches will become crowded. Tourism will start again. We will then be facing clients whose basic impulses will not have changed. Lottie Gross asked the question, what do you hope the travel industry will learn or gain from the crisis? So that's perhaps at the other end of the spectrum. I would love to know from each of you whether the travel industry will change as a result of coronavirus. Rachel, why don't you start? You happy to go first?
Will it change? Cool, that's a huge question. I think it will change. In a way, I sort of hope it might change. I hope that whilst this is an incredibly bumpy period and there are going to be some casualties through it, sadly, that what will come out in the new normal that everybody's sort of talking about and trying to size up is that people's behaviour patterns and maybe some of their value systems will have changed. We've talked and worked so hard, many of us, for such a long time in a culture that is time poor, cash rich, whatever. Not all of us at all, I know, but we've actually suddenly got more time, and some of those values perhaps are being restored. Simple things, you know, the pleasure in walking outside in the park, spending some time in your garden, if you have one and are lucky enough to have one. Seeking, you know, the contact with friends, the importance of travel in education, in business, etc., etc. But I believe and hope, and it's a hope more than anything based on data, and probably my terrible idealistic self, is that the world that we come out and into will be a better world. The values will be kinder, and we will, you know, see a surge in more responsible travel across the globe.
Very good. Claire, what are your thoughts on the future shape of the travel industry?
I had an idea that I wondered whether or not we should all be issued with air miles to actually, you know, so that we look at before, you know, before we travel, about how we're going to configure it. Like buses have freedom to travel anywhere, but maybe we could be more considerate and look at how we travel and traveling better. Is
Having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Claire, sorry.
Traveling
Yes,
just
perfect.
manner, and looking at that as a way for the future is something that I think might well be a way of travel. I think we're going to be looking at cleanliness and hygiene. I mean, I don't know whether everybody's going to be on a spacesuit when they get on that aeroplane for the first time. They're going to be looking like astronauts, but I think that there will be hygiene, sanitization issues. I think we'll be asking hotels how they clean. I think that there are even plastics that have been invented now that don't actually carry viruses on them, that I think cruise ships are looking at. I think that healthcare will be, we already have been making recommendations to clients about having doctors, if they don't have doctors, having healthcare services, looking at insurance policies with private hospitals in countries around the world. But there's going to be a lot of things that actually are going to be different. We are making those recommendations now, and are quite interesting points, be it cleanliness, healthcare, and virus transportation on certain surfaces. Yeah, I think that we will be different. I think that we will have a lot more paranoia, and I think that the industry has to react accordingly. And I read a piece by Matthew Harris in the Times saying that we'll get back, you know, we've got short memories, we get back, and then after 6 months we'll all be back to normal. We might take that viewpoint, but the new normal will have a different look about it, I think, with all those factors being much more considered.
Very, very interesting indeed. And I'll go to Paul next. I'm going to throw in here that we are a mature outbound market. British travellers are used to travelling, so ideas about air mile quotas and so on are very interesting. But there are emerging markets such as China who will say, well, we haven't done our travelling yet. We want to discover this world. You know, what do you think the outcome will be, Paul?
I think at the end of the day, the virus won't kill off the DNA in all of us to travel. Yeah. That's what humans do. We want to interact, we want to travel, we want to see new things, meet people. That won't be killed off by the virus. So it will come back. It will be in a different form. I think we will be more responsible. I think we can't do anything until the FCO removes the indefinite travel ban, which is extraordinary in itself. How long is indefinite? Yeah. Secondly, it's going to rely a lot on what countries do. So small islands around the world, I think it's going to take quite a while for them to want to open their borders, because although they realize the economic impact of not having tourists, they realize they can't risk letting the virus in again until a vaccine is mass produced. So a lot of places we may not actually be able to go to over the next year, even if the UK came off this indefinite ban. I think finally we're going to see consolidation not just among airlines, hotel groups, potentially cruise lines. You're going to see a lot of that over the next few weeks, especially airlines. Without a doubt, there's 2 or 3 about to emerge in the next 3 days. So you're going to see that, but you're also going to see consolidation among media and also among PR agencies, I suspect.
Yes.
There are entrepreneurs on this panel and out there everywhere probably watching who will want to take part in consolidation of some kind. So I think those are the next steps that will keep everybody busy luckily over the next few weeks.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Paul. Jennifer, your thoughts from a trade perspective on what the new normal in the travel industry will be like?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? And I think history's probably shown us that on the whole, travel companies are led by the consumer. And I think is going to be really difficult, because of course travel companies have been severely financially impacted throughout this time, so they're going to be desperate to be taking as many bookings and making as much money as they can on the other side. But I suppose what will be interesting are any travel companies that kind of actively within that try and promote a better way of traveling and introduce certain measures or things like that to kind of improve the sustainability. I think in terms of an industry issue is this idea of cash flow, which has obviously come up hugely with the refunds debate, and a few experts have kind of predicted that there may be calls to change the way in which cash is transferred from the consumer to the end supplier, so that it doesn't leave kind of intermediate travel businesses vulnerable to chargebacks or kind of having to foot the bill. But at the same time, obviously, protects the consumer. So there may be calls for money to be held in some kind of government protected fund that kind of takes out the liability, if you like, from other travel businesses. Because obviously, we saw from the Thomas Cook collapse the horrendous impact that had across the industry. And ultimately, I suppose if travel companies fail, then any ATOL protected bookings will be funded by the government in effect. So it's kind of that balancing act, I guess, they have to come up with as to whether they're going to help enforce change.
Very good indeed. Isabel, the new normal, please. Oh, Isabel, I think we've lost you. Can just...
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, there you are.
The new normal. Well, like Rachel said, it's a big question. I don't know. What I hope is that it will change the way we travel, that the changes we were already seeing before this happened in terms of a much greater interest in sustainability, responsible travel, cutting back on flying, that will, this crisis will only have strengthened that, and there will be a much sort of a bigger appetite for slow travel, for the idea of discovering places on your doorstep. But my fear is that that there will be also this pent-up demand, and that it will mean that as soon as people can, they will travel, and they will be desperate to go anywhere that isn't their local neighborhood, and that it will have the sort of the opposite effect of what we would want, and also that obviously countries' economies are so dependent on tourism economically will want to turbocharge travel and tourism to get back on track. So obviously my hope is that there'll be a positive outcome. I kind of worry that Matthew Paris is right, and that we do have short memories, although nothing like this has ever happened before. So this one is going to lodge in our memories like never before. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that it will there will be a fundamental shift in the way we think about travel. But I also think that just reality and our sort of desperation to get back to normal after all of this, in the same way that everyone's going to start, the pubs are going to be packed, we're all going to be going on a massive sort of bender for a month to celebrate, that will come out in travel, and a sort of desperate need to jump on a plane as soon as you're actually physically able to. I don't know which way it's gonna go yet. Perhaps it will go both ways. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you, Isabel. I'll join you on that bender. Lisa, finally, from your 21 years experience covering the travel industry, how do you think we will emerge from this, and will things change or?
I think things will change, but I think it's, again, you know, as Jennifer says, it's led by the consumer. We're looking at the biggest depression since the 30s, they're saying. I think for some readers, they are going to be amongst those who are going to have been most affected by this, genuinely having lost jobs, having had pay cuts. I think for me, I'm looking at, once lockdown does lift, I think focusing on the UK, I think staycations, I hated that word 10 years ago. It now just seems to roll off the tongue. Staycations are going to be much more what I'm going to be focusing on to start with. And then it's going to be, for me, it's going to be about value travel. I mean, I do understand the whole idea of responsible tourism and flying less, but the stark reality is for a lot of Sun readers, you know, they have one holiday a year. You know, they will take one flight to one destination in Spain. They're not the ones who are going to be looking at stopping travelling because that one holiday a year is all they're going to take. And I'm going to be making sure that it's, you know, it's going to be about making people understand, you know, the best ways to travel, you know, the most savvy budget-wise, responsible travel-wise, but also quite a lot of UK, I think, to start with for me.
Brilliant. Well, we need to bring things to an end there. It's been the most fascinating webinar, and I think our panelists have been brilliant. And if our audience was all connected, there would be a big round of applause at this particular moment in time. You've all been amazing. So thank you so much to our panelists today. Thank you to our audience for listening in. Great that we still got over 160 people, which is fantastic. Thank you to my team, to Ali bringing this together on the marketing front, Ash for running the webinar. These are, as we've heard, unprecedented times. It is certainly an existential moment in our history, but ultimately we're all in this together, and we will all emerge together, and we have that to look forward to. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and see you on the next webinar. Bye, everyone.